Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ko namatipye rasavit khatayam mahatam maikanta parayanasya nantam gunanam agunasya jagmur yogeshwaraye bhavapadma mukhya. Ko nama tripyedra savit khatayam mahatamaikanta parayanasya nantam gunanam agunasya jagmur nantam gunanam agunasya jagmur yogeshwaraye bhavapadma mukhya. Synonyms: Kaha, who is, he; Nama, specifically; Tripyet, get full satisfaction; Rasavit, expert in relishing mellow nectar; Kathayam, in the topics of; Mahat Tama, the greatest amongst the living beings; Ekanta, exclusively; Paraya Nasya, of one who is the shelter of; Na, never; Antam, end; Gunanam, of attributes; Agunasya, of the transcendence; Jagmu, could ascertain; Yoga Ishvara, the lords of mystic power; Ye, all they; Bhava, Lord Shiva; Padma, Lord Brahma; Mukhya, heads. Translation: the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, Govinda, is the exclusive shelter of all great living beings. And his transcendental attributes cannot even be measured by such masters of mystic powers as Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. Can anyone who is expert in relishing nectar or rasa ever be fully satiated by hearing topics about him? Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai. Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma are two chiefs of the demigods. They are full of mystic powers. For example, Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison, of which one drop was sufficient to kill an ordinary living being. Similarly, Brahma could create many powerful demigods, including Lord Shiva. So they are Ishwaras, or lords of the universe, but they are not the supreme powerful. The supreme powerful is Govinda, Lord Krishna. He is the transcendence, and his transcendental attributes cannot be measured even by such powerful Ishwaras as Shiva and Brahma. Therefore, Lord Krishna is the exclusive shelter of the greatest of all living beings. Brahma is counted amongst the living beings, but he is the greatest of all of us. And why is the greatest of all the living beings so much attached to the transcendental topics of Lord Krishna? Because he is the reservoir of all enjoyment. Everyone wants to relish some kind of taste in everything, but one who is engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord can derive unlimited pleasure from such engagement. The Lord is unlimited, and his name, attributes, pastimes, entourage, variegatedness, etc. are unlimited, and those who relish them can do so unlimitedly and still not feel satiated. This fact is confirmed in the Padma Purana. Ramante yogino nante satyananda chid atmani iti rama padanashau param brahma bhidyayate. The mystics derive unlimited transcendental pleasures from the absolute truth. And therefore the supreme absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, is also known as Rama. There is no end to such transcendental discourses. In mundane affairs, there is a law of satiation, but in transcendence, there is no such satiation. Sutta Goswami desired to continue the topics of Lord Krishna before the sages of Naimisharanya, and the sages also expressed their readiness to hear from him continuously. Since the Lord is transcendent and his attributes are transcendental, such discourses increase the receptive mood of the purified audience. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gnananjana Shalakya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Good morning, everyone. Hare Krishna. Welcome to this morning's class. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, Text 14. And the backdrop so far is that in this chapter, the Bhagavatam is leading up the most unlikely action of the great Parikshit Maharaj and the severe consequences of that in the form of a fatal curse that would end his life. So some of the key points that I would like to make during this lecture, which, again, I would like for you all to pay close attention to, are, the Lord's qualities are unmatchable, even for the greatest of the great, like Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. Lord Krishna, his qualities are limitless, and like his qualities, his forms and pastimes are also limitless. He is the ultimate shelter of all living entities, and one can therefore never tire of hearing the pastimes of the Lord. So if being motivated to listen to lectures on the Srimad Bhagavatam or reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam is an issue, we should understand, we should internalize that the Lord's pastimes are so limitless and so interesting and so engaging that if we can only get our attention to focus on these pastimes, then being motivated or having the need to get motivated even goes away, right? So the need to get motivated is pretty evident, and once you start hearing these wonderful pastimes, it becomes very, very easy for us to get absorbed. So without further ado, let me get started. So Lord Brahma is the greatest of all living entities, and he's considered the greatest in this universe, not simply because he is the empowered creator of the different species in this universe. The Bhagavatam says that there are 8.4 million species, and of which 100,000 are human beings in this universe alone. Okay, so I'm talking about just the species. When I say 100,000, the Bhagavatam is saying there are 100,000 species of human beings. So Brahma is empowered by the Supreme Lord to create all these species. And what to speak of the millions of variations of living entities within each of these species. How many different butterflies have you seen in your life? How many different types of birds have you seen? How many different types of fish in the oceans around the world? What to speak of all the different varieties of flowers and plants around the world? It's just limitless, right? Even now, people haven't fully recorded and they continue to discover more and more and more and more. So there are newer species that are waiting to be discovered as well. From a personal example, I should say a few years ago, I had a back injury as I was working in the yard. And so I had to get an MRI done. And so I had to take the MRI scan into the specialist, the orthopedic specialist. And as the doctor was showing me the scan, I was watching it on this big screen. I was amazed. And if you know how the MRI is done, it goes layer by layer by layer by layer. And this was, an MRI of my entire spine, all the way from my brain stem down to the lower back. right? So I was looking at, the picture that was unfolding in front of my eyes, and I was completely amazed with the level of complexity in the design of the spine. I mean, the curvature of the spine, the intricate shapes of each vertebrae, how they all fit together, how they work in collaboration, and the bundles of nerves that go from the brain through the spinal cord that's housed in the spine, and how all of these control the various thoughts and movements of all the parts of the body through the nerve endings. And that's just the spine. Think of all the specialized organs within our body. We don't even think of the seemingly simple act of even taking a breath, right? We just take it for granted. We just breathe. We don't even think. We don't even think about how the internals of our body are working. And even as we breathe, how is that oxygen extracted from the air, and it's transported throughout our body through the bloodstream. I mean, it's such a complex process. If you think about it, it's a design that is so intelligent that's beyond us. How is all of this happening, right? I mean, we don't even stop to think. And another simple example, in contrast, relatively speaking, right? We're building this temple to fulfill Srila Prabhupada's mission and to serve the community at large within Chicagoland. Premananda Mataji, Damodar Leela Prabhu, and several others, we're all spending so much time with the architects, the civil engineers, the HVAC engineers, the structural engineers, the general contractors, and many others like electricians, plumbers, fitters. I mean, there are so many others that are all coming together to make this one building. And that's like our lifetime achievement. Whereas Lord Brahma has been creating structures that are 1 trillion times more complex since time immemorial, right? And that to original designs. What we've invented or designed are more or less copycats of what Brahma has already designed. Right? For instance, take the modern aeroplane, right? The airplane is nothing but an imitation of how the bird works, right? How the bird flies, the aerodynamics, and so on. Similarly, the ship, these massive ships that we see in the ocean are nothing but replicas of fish and how they navigate through the ocean on the principles of buoyancy and so on. So we take so many things for granted, but even the simplest movements we humans make on a daily basis, it involves so many complex mechanisms within our bodies. For instance, a simple smile can activate 12 muscles, facial muscles, 12 muscles. And of course, if you're grumpy, you're still, exercising those muscles, but only 11. And that's why they say, it's better to smile than to frown. So coming back to Lord Brahma, that's one Brahma for this universe, the universe that we are in. What about the trillions of universes that exist beyond ours? So even our present day scientists and astrophysicists agree that there's more than just one universe, and there are as many universes as the grains of sand on all the beaches around the world. I mean, can you just imagine that? I mean, we don't stop to think, right? We're constantly running from one day to the other, from 1 hour to the other, from one activity to the other. But we don't think of this intelligent design behind all of our existence. And we think we're the biggest, we're the greatest, the whole focus is on me. But there's so much more happening all around us. We're just not even a tiny speck. I mean, to say we're a tiny speck in itself is an insult to Lord Brahma's creation, because there is so much, the universe is so much bigger than us, right? And that's just this universe. And there's so many other universes that are there. So it's just mind-boggling to even think that if there is a Brahma for each universe, and there are as many universes as the number of grains of sand, across all the beaches in the world, you can just imagine how many Brahmas there are, right? In fact, The Bhagavatam also talks about how once when Brahma went to see Lord Vishnu, he was asked at the entrance who he was. And Lord Brahma, being Lord Brahma, meaning the creator of this universe, he was like, are you kidding me? I mean, is this real? Don't you know who I am? You know, that kind of a thing. But he went ahead and said, I'm Brahma, I'm from, so-and-so. And so they said, very good, sir, please take your seat, wait for, and the Lord will be with you shortly. So Lord Brahma was a little perturbed, and but nevertheless, he sat down and he was waiting for, Lord Vishnu to come there and see him. And as he was waiting, there were Brahmas walking in, some with 10 heads, some with 100 heads, some with 1,000 heads, some with 10,000 heads even, depending on the size of their universe. So Brahma was completely amazed. It was only then it dawned upon him that, hey, there are other Brahmas, there are other universes as well. See, as all knowledgeable as he is, even that is so difficult for Brahma to understand the extent of creation of the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Ishvara. So even as amazing as our Lord Brahma is, even his capabilities are limited to this universe, the universe that we're in, right? Similarly, Lord Shiva, as we know him in this universe, he's the expansion of Shambhu from the spiritual realm, right? And Lord Shiva, as Prabhupada has mentioned, the purport as well, is most well known for drinking the ocean of poison, but even one drop can kill the toughest of living beings in a moment. But then Lord Shiva consumed the entire ocean for the sake of humanity, for the sake of doing what was requested of him. And he's fine. He was absolutely fine, and he continues to be of service to the Lord, right? So that didn't do anything to him. It didn't impact him in any way. So that shows the greatness of Lord Shiva, how great he is. And even Lord Shiva, as great as he is, as described again in the Bhagavatam, is that he has 80%, he's considered the topmost Vaishnava as far as the Lord is concerned. And even then, Lord Shiva is considered to have 80% of the qualities of the Lord himself. Okay, and so in contrast, if you look at it, Lord Brahma has only about 30% or so. Okay, these are the numbers. Again, I'm quoting from what I've read in the Srimad Bhagavatam. I don't have the exact reference. I believe it's in Canto 1. I can look for it and let you know. But that's what we find out. So even Lord Brahma, in his wonderful prayers to the Supreme Lord, he says, Premanjana Charita Bhakta Vilochanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Says, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord who is Shama Sundara, Krishna himself, with inconceivable, innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see. And how do they see? In the hearts, in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion, tinged with the salve of love. This is Brahma's prayers. So it is no surprise that Krishna's qualities are limitless, as he is the supreme controller, of all creation. Right? Not just this universe or that universe, but across all creation. Ishvara, Paramakrishna, right? And that's also there in Brahma's prayers. And you don't see the Lord lifting even a finger to do that, right? You see him in his blissful state always. You contrast that with some of the Greek mythology where you have, Atlas lifting this heavy planet on his back, right? It's so huge that you can see him actually straining, as he's lifting that. But you don't see that with Krishna. Krishna is the supreme controller. He's the creator of all creation, but you don't You never see him even lifting a finger for that, right? It's almost effortless. Similarly, Krishna is also the ultimate shelter for all living beings. For when we constantly hear the topics of the Lord, we're constantly meditating upon him. And when we meditate upon him, we are automatically protected by him. So that's another reason why we should be thinking of developing that taste, developing that discipline, developing that routine for us. I mean, a routine in a good sense, not in a bad sense, but routine meaning making it so much a part of our day-to-day lives, our daily lives, in terms of hearing from the Bhagavatam, hearing from the Vaishnavas, hearing from the pure devotees, so that we are constantly reminded of the Lord. And when we remember the Lord, then we are automatically in his protection. Now, even Maya Devi, personified, she stands with folded hands in front of the pure devotee that is surrendered to the Lord. So that is stated many times throughout our scriptures. So even at the start of this chapter, the very first verse talks about how Maharaj Parikshit was untouched even by the powerful Brahmastra that could potentially destroy this entire planet in just like a flash. But that is protection, right? So he is, in the womb of his mother, and comes Krishna to help out, right? And he's protecting. He protects Maharaj Parikshit even then, right? We can't even protect ourselves when our spouse begins to unleash a barrage of facts with dates and timestamps and everything else. You did this on that particular day, and you said this, you said that, right? And we were completely left defenseless. We can only go through that barrage. We can try to respond, but hey, don't even try. It's not going to work. And I'm sure you've all already seen that by experience. So the ultimate protection comes from the Lord. We can only do so much by ourselves in terms of being able to protect anyone around us or even ourselves. And that happens only when we are surrendered. Right? The question is, are we really surrendered to the Lord? So even when we're going through difficult times, for instance, right? Maya is slapping us left and right in the face. And what do? We run to the Lord and we say, Lord, please help us. Please help me get through this terrible situation. Please set things right. And he does that. He does that. And of course, we don't want to be, tied to the outcomes, but it could be a lot worse. It doesn't mean that Krishna is not helping us, right? Krishna is there. But then after that situation is over, we're off to our own conquest again, right? We're off to doing our own usual stuff, our usual nonsense. It kind of reminds me of one of my daughters when she was little, when she would do something wrong and I would, reprimand her or, chastise her for doing that. She would look up at me and defiantly, as the saying, okay, just because you're 4 feet taller than me right now, I'm listening to you. And so we continue, that kind of an attitude, even now with the Lord in everything that we do, right? We're taking that help, but at the same time, we're defiant. We're not willing to really, really surrender, learn from our mistakes, and actually surrender to a point where we're taking the Lord's guidance at every single moment. And that should become a part of us, right? That spontaneity is not there because Maya is acting from all directions all the time, right? So we're constantly being bombarded. We have our conditioning for all the various reasons over millions of lifetimes. So all of this is weighing down on us to a point that we are turning away from Krishna. And the moment we turn away from Krishna, we've lost the protection. There is no protection there, even though, Krishna is waiting for us to just turn towards him and say, and express our affection towards him, and he's there to help us. So the Bhagavatam speaks of so many such pastimes where surrender to the Lord always results in complete freedom from this material bondage. So the protection also comes and manifests itself in a way that it frees the person from this miserable material situation that we put ourselves in. Some of the examples, I mean, there are numerous examples, but some of the examples that I can think of right now are, take Kaliya, a poisonous serpent. It was so poisonous that the waters of the river Yamuna were completely contaminated, killing all life within it. And drinking these waters, many gopas fell to the ground, dying and gasping for their life as. However, when Krishna, even as a little boy, when he took charge, he completely transformed the poisonous Kaliya into a snake that was fully surrendered to him. So Kaliya is a proud snake with multiple heads. And Krishna just jumped right on his head and started dancing. And every time his foot came down on one of the heads of Kaliya, and Kaliya was not keeping quiet. He was fighting back, right? So he has multiple heads. He was trying to bite the Lord every which way and any which way he could. Krishna was so gracefully, dancing and so expertly, avoiding each of those bites. And in a way that every time he landed on the head, it was like, the whole universe was landing on Kaliya's heads. So at one point in time, Kaliya finally had to surrender. And having surrendered, Kaliya could relish, the taste of being surrendered to Krishna. Right. And so he was saved. And, the story goes on. So that's one of the beautiful pastimes. You take, the 5-year-old Dhruva Maharaj being insulted by his stepmother, Suriti. He was driven by his Kshatriya blood to revolt. And on his mother Suniti's advice, he left for the forest in a huff and puff, not caring about, the dangers, but with the determination that he wanted to get a kingdom that was greater than his father's or even his great-grandfather, Brahma's, Lord Brahma that we're talking about, right? With Narada's help, he's able to focus on meditating on the Lord. And when the Lord does appear and awards him with everything that he can ask for, all that Dhruva Maharaj is thinking at that point in time is just how fortunate he is to receive and be able to see the Lord in person. So everything else, material, just vanishes at that point completely from his mind. He's not even thinking about what he had actually started out to do, right? Just getting that reception, that visual reception of being in the presence of the Lord was in itself completely satisfying. He was completely satiated in the Lord's presence. And that's what true surrender is. And the Lord gives safe passage not just to Dhruva Maharaj, but also to his mother, Suniti, as well, right? So that's the greatness of the Lord. So we're in complete protection. What to speak of Prahlad Maharaj? He was the son of a demon king, and he was terrorized by his own father, right? And this father of his was such a terror that he had the 3 worlds completely terrorized to a point that they couldn't breathe. And Prahlad Maharaj, born into a demon family, he was always surrounded by demons. And he was even taught in demoniac ways by his teachers. Can you imagine? His teachers were also demoniac. And as though that wasn't enough, he was subject to the harshest of demoniac punishments by his own father, Hiranyakashipu. And this is a 5-year-old boy that we're talking about. But Prahlad, having heard the pastimes of the Lord, even when he was in the womb of his mother, was so attracted to the Lord that he exhibited the highest of transcendental qualities, Krishneka Sharana. That's the highest. Of all the qualities, Krishneka Sharana. In other words, complete surrender to Krishna. He didn't care for his life, whether he was being thrown into a pot of boiling oil, or he was thrown into a pit of poisonous snakes, or he was thrown into a fire. It didn't matter to him, because he said, he was completely fixed on the Lord. He knew that he was in the Lord's protection. There was nothing to worry about. And that resulted in Krishna's protection at every step until evil Hiranyakashipu was destroyed by the Lord finally. So we're all driven by modes of material nature, every moment of our lives. And it doesn't matter who we are, where we are. And as long as we are in this material world, we are fair game to Maya. She will do her services perfectly to the Lord. We can never, escape her clutches. I mean, you may call it mission impossible, but there is a way. There is one way, and that is just by surrendering completely to the Lord, not out of fear, but with love. I mean, with fear, people who do it, which is also okay. I'm not saying that's not, but hey, it's even better if we can surrender to the Lord, because the Lord is all loving. So when we surrender to Krishna with love, right, and that's bhakti. That's bhakti. And that's all it takes. Krishna is there to reciprocate. And in return, he unconditionally gives himself to us. He's Bhaktavatsala at the end of it. And here we're talking about Krishna, who is the supreme controller, who is served by millions of goddesses of fortune, right? Lakshmi Sahasra Shata Sambrama Sevyamana. Brahma is saying, Chintamani prakara rasadma sukalpa vriksha lakshavriteshu surabhira vipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasra Shata Sambrama Sevyamanam Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Chintamani, the touchstone. Kalpa Vriksha. So, we're talking about how Brahma is saying, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desire. Chintamani is the touchstone. In abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees. Kalpa Vrikshas. Right? And Laksha Vriteshu Surabhira Vipalayantam. He is tending to the lakhs of cows. I mean, he loves cows so much. And then he's served, in great reverence and affection by hundreds of thousands of goddesses of fortune. Lakshmi Sahasra Shata Sambrama Sevyamanam. And such a Lord is giving himself unconditionally to us, right? He becomes subservient to the devotee. Just imagine, and all that he is looking to is to see that glint, that sincerity in terms of the love that we express for him. That's it. And he becomes conquered. He becomes surrendered to us. So, take the example of the role that he played even in the Battle of Kurukshetra, right? The role of the Chariter, as Prabhupada has mentioned in some of his lectures, it is so demanding and it is so dangerous. It is so physically demanding and it's extreme. The Chariter has to, steer the chariot through rough terrains. It has to navigate through the army, through a shower of arrows, take the brunt of the enemy in the face, and even gets kicked in the back by the passenger of the chariot to move the chariot in the right direction, right? And even that, Krishna was happy to do for his dear friend Arjuna, for his dear friend and devotee and cousin Arjuna. So how does this all apply to us? Okay, so here's a personal situation that can put what we discussed in perspective. This morning, I woke up completely stressed out. Work pressure has been on the rise, and it's been on the rise for a while, but the last couple of weeks have been exponentially high. It's just been crazy at work. But as I was laying in bed, I asked myself, why am I so stressed? It's not just the physicality of this, situation of being stressed out, but more deeply, right? Why am I stressed out? What's the big picture? Why am I so stressed out? I mean, I've been working for the last 32, 33 years now, right? And it's not that I haven't dealt with difficult situations or challenging situations over the last 3+ decades. But I was thinking there's got to be something more to it, right? I mean, why? And then I realized, some of these realizations were coming to me. And again, like I was saying, we don't stop to think. We don't take time to smell the flowers, as they say, right? Take the time to smell the roses. We don't do any of that. We're constantly running back to back, not thinking twice. But some of these, the beautiful lessons that we are receiving from the Srimad Bhagavatam, and also from the Bhagavata, the pure devotees around us who are giving us these wonderful insights, which are strictly supportive, right? And help us through all of these difficult situations and the good situations. But we don't reflect on those because we don't spend enough time absorbing what we're receiving, from these pure devotees in terms of the messages, because we're in that moment maybe for some time, for a flash, and then it's gone, right? It evaporates. And then, of course, Maya is acting on us. So all of these things are acting on us. So what I'm getting at is we need to be conscious about receiving the mercy that we're receiving, and in a way that we can actually retain that, reflect upon it, especially during these difficult times. But keep in mind, when we're stressed, I'm not saying it's easy because you're in the middle of this whole battle of Kurukshetra that is raging through your head, in and around you. So judgment is impaired. So what do? We tend to do the wrong things, though. We take to false shelters, okay, maybe I should have some extra laddus, or I may, want to have some TV time. But am I doing the right things? No, non-devotees may even resort to other things like alcohol or gambling or doing, other things that we don't want to discuss here, right? But what is that doing? That is actually binding ourselves, binding us even more to this material world. And are we even thinking of the consequences? No. We're not even thinking of the consequences. So there are material consequences and there are afterlife consequences too, which are even greater, but we're not thinking through those things. So even this slightest indulgence, if you take it, right, like spending some time to, de-stress ourselves, saying, okay, maybe I should have something nice to eat, maybe, whatever, right? Whatever you think is your immediate resort to getting over the stress. But even that indulgence is only temporary, right? It only lasts for a flash. And then all that glimmer is gone and we're still stressed. And like I said, we have the consequences to face along with that, because the karmic reactions are always going to be there, right? When we're away from Krishna, Maya is there and the laws of karma start to work. So what do we need to do? We need to instead continue to work fixed in our consciousness that we're doing it for the pleasure of Krishna. We need to somehow get that into our system, internalize that I am doing this. It may be a stressful situation, hey, but I should not be in any anxiety, regardless of the situation. Don't be in anxiety. Why? Because if we know that we're doing it in service for the pleasure of Krishna, Krishna's protection is there. Absolutely. And as devotees, we don't worry about the outcomes. Okay, so the outcome could be good, the outcome could be bad, it could be positive, negative. But think about it. If it's positive, hey, everything is fine, no complaints there. But if it's negative, even that negativity, if it's, let's say it's not what we'd expected, it could have been a lot worse if we didn't have the protection of Krishna, right? And again, think about this. The battle of Kurukshetra, we're reading the Bhagavad Gita regularly, right? The battle of Kurukshetra didn't happen in one day. It happened over several days, and it was not an easy fight for the Pandavas, right? The Pandava brothers were excellent when it came to the martial arts. They were super excellent. But even then, their army was maybe 1/5 of the army of the Kauravas, right? Sheer numbers itself, they were outnumbered. And every day they went, it's not like, they went in and because they were so expert, they could avoid the thousands, hundreds of thousands. You're talking about Maharathas on the other side. Duryodhana was no small guy either. He was an expert in his, in his own standing. And so there were these fantastic Maharathas, Bhishma Dev and so on, right? Dronacharya. You have all of these wonderful personalities that are so good at what they do. Therefore, there was a complete shower of arrows coming every second, every moment at these Pandava heroes, right? So they took a lot of arrows. It's not that they didn't, on a daily basis. And some days it was up, the result of the battle, and some days it was completely down. But that didn't deter them because they knew that they were doing it for Krishna and they had Krishna on their side. So it didn't matter all of this externality that was happening around them, didn't really faze them. Bhima was always fired up to go back into the battle and fight like 10,000 elephants, raging in the war. So it was amazing even to the enemy to say, hey, for Duryodhana also, and all the soldiers, what to speak of the soldiers, right, who were on the battlefield. And they were like, what's going on? I mean, we keep hitting them and hitting them and hitting them, and they keep coming back, with so much energy and so much power that they started to, doubt their own capabilities and were actually fleeing from the battlefield. Okay, so this is the battle of Kurukshetra we're talking about. So we are going through personal day-to-day situations which put us in stress and anxiety, but we have to keep in mind that even in tough situations, even as stressful as it gets, it doesn't mean that Krishna is not there. And one thing we should remember, it is not that Krishna is testing us or punishing us. I mean, if Krishna were to punish us, God forbid, it should never happen to any of us. But Krishna could destroy us and throw us into the worst throes of hell in a flash of a second, right? But he'll never do that. And he doesn't need to do that. I mean, he is all loving. So we have to develop our love for Krishna. And the way we do that is by becoming more and more interested in the topics, being interested in our services that we do. Do it with I shouldn't say pride, but the pride in a good way, where we're doing it with love for Krishna. As we do that, and as we keep doing that, it becomes a part of us. Then our conditioning changes, our whole mindset changes. And that's why Srila Prabhupada very correctly said, this is all about our consciousness, right? That's why, our institution is called the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. It's just by changing our consciousness, we're able to deal with these stresses of the material world so much more effectively, right? And when we keep doing that over and over again by, all the things that we just discussed, we're going to be in the protection of the Lord. And it's going to become so much more natural for us. We don't even have to think. It'll become spontaneous at some point in time. And those are the stages of bhakti, right? Prema bhakti. To achieve that, we need to, that's what will happen. But to get to that point, we need to practice. And that practice comes through chanting, through association, and by hearing from the Bhagavatam. So the Bhagavatam is so amazing because it gives us all this practicality and all of these beautiful pastimes that only bring us closer to Krishna, right? And when we see that and we apply that in our day-to-day lives, that's the amazing part of the Bhagavatam, is that the practicality is preserved so well that even after all these thousands of years, we can still apply. You take any page in the Bhagavatam and you read, and you will be able to apply the messages into your practical life. And that's what we need to do. It's not just going in for a lecture, sitting there and absorbing, yeah, that was a beautiful pastime. That was really interesting, and the speaker was very, very, very articulate and, whatever, right? And then the moment we leave, everything is forgotten and gone. No, we should internalize. That's the thing. We need to internalize. So when we hear, we should be able to relate that to some of our practical situations. By doing that, we're actually tightening that bond back to Krishna. So we're able to apply what we're hearing, not just hearing the message, but actually being able to apply that. The application starts from that internalization of the message. When we hear the message and we apply that to our practical lives, then it makes it so much more easier for us to understand, to practice, and most importantly, to appreciate and be able to love Krishna the way we should. It doesn't become superficial. At that point, you're starting to get inner and inner deeper inside ourselves in terms of understanding, what it means to serve Krishna. So then once that happens, then it doesn't really matter, if a person is, on the other side is being good to us or bad to us, or the situation is nice or not nice, if I'm in a healthy or a not healthy situation, because now your focus is about pleasing Krishna, and by pleasing Krishna, when Krishna is happy, the reciprocation is right there. He reciprocates, and you can feel it, right? So we need to stay saturated in Krishna consciousness. And the Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, is the best way to do this. So I know I have about 9 minutes or so left. Let me know if you have any questions. We can have some discussion. Let me stop here and see if there's any discussion. Hare Krishna. Anything that resonated with you, or you feel you need a little more elaboration, or things that you don't agree with, feel free, because we're a small group and we're trying to discuss. And I'm in no way perfected or anything like that, but there's so much that I'm learning just by preparing for these classes itself is an exercise in purification. And it gives me, so much to think about, to meditate upon, to introspect, and see where I am. And we need to do that, regularly, periodically. I'm not saying you need to do it every moment or every day, but at least think about, are we making progress? Are we making, and what do I need to do differently, in the ways in which I deal with life, the ways in which I am carrying myself. And it's not going to happen overnight, obviously. It's a journey, and we're all in this journey together. So keep that in mind and be true to yourself. Be true to yourself, because you're the one who's going to benefit at the end of the day. And if you tend to, and which we all do, at some point of in the day, or even in our lives, we tend to push things under the rug. It's okay. No one's watching, it'll be fine. Or, we go easy on ourselves and say, okay, maybe I did it this time. Yeah, I'll try not to do it the next time, but that's it. I'm not going to really, really go hard on myself. I'm not saying we need to go hard on ourselves, but at least recognize that it was something we shouldn't have done, or something we could do better, right? To get closer to Krishna. And that's the golden standard, right? So the way to check ourselves is, are we getting closer to Krishna? Is Krishna going to be pleased with what I'm doing, regardless of the activity? And if the answer is yes, it's nothing to worry. You're on the right path, right? And to help us be able to discriminate and think if I'm doing the right thing, we have Guru, Sadhu, Shastra, right? So these three are the pillars that help us guide and hone in directionally in terms of where we should be going, so that we know, are we heading towards Krishna, or are we heading away from Krishna? And as long as we're heading towards Krishna, it's needless to say, we're doing the right thing.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, thank you so much, Prabhu, for a nice class. So, there are a couple of points. One is actually, 1 second, Prabhu. Yeah, so my couple of points. I think one you mentioned in the beginning, almost beginning of the class, regarding when there is a difficulty, right? We will, the people will turn towards God, right? When the difficulty is gone, then again we forget it. In our case, especially, right? So, we feel the presence of the God many times, right? So, because of, the Lord is so merciful. But then again, even by knowing that, right? So, without the Lord's hand, that could not have happened, that activity or whatever happened to us. But again, we forget it and get into our normal situation. right? So I mean that is very common, right, to me. I mean maybe to some of the devotees as well. So though we remember, but then again it's not constantly within us, right? So then again, the things that we do, I mean, the second point I was thinking, the things that we do take away from Krishna, I mean, knowingly or unknowingly, because of our tendencies, we do those things, right? So, I mean, it's actually, we should not say unknowingly because we know enough of the philosophy from and studying Prabhupada books. Right? Still, we do those things. I mean, one is, of course, the false ego, Prabhu. I mean, I'm thinking, but what is that practically that we need to do, right? To come out
So,
of those kind of, I mean, to reduce those at least, may not immediately. I mean, first one is
right.
actually how do we remember? The second one is that how do we come out of those tendencies, right? I mean, the
So one of the first things, and you're right, we're so fortunate, Prabhu. I'll tell you this: we need to really understand, what we're receiving. First of all, right? That gratitude that we hold is going to be our medicine going forward. It's going to be that stick, if you can call it that, that will keep us on the path, which will keep us on track. Why? Because as devotees now, we're given these wonderful tools that we spoke about, the pure devotees giving their heart and soul, different, going to different parts of the world, different to different time zones, and all the difficulties that they do, just to give us the message. Even if it means taking 2 hours to have translations done in Chinese, for instance. I'm just taking simple examples, but these are very, very difficult. Think about ourselves. I mean, I get up in the mornings and I'm at an age where I can't call myself young. I'm not old, but I'm not young, definitely. And there are aches and pains. And what to think about, speak about these wonderful devotees who are way beyond our age, who are still going, to different parts of the world and giving, these messages selflessly, unconditionally, right? So we should be really grateful. That's number one. That gratitude that we are on the path of devotional service. Being on the path of devotional service now, Krishna is giving us that protection. We just have to now get our tuners on, so that we can tune in and stay on that path. So it starts there. So once we do that, then we keep doing that on a regular basis. Now the remembrance comes in, right? So by remembering Krishna itself is a huge thing. You think about it. 99.9999% of people who are going through a difficult situation, for instance, just going back to your example, they're not even thinking of Krishna. They're not thinking of God. They're thinking of all the things that they could do differently, or blame it on somebody else, blame it on the situation, they're just in the submersing themselves in the situation to a point they're not thinking beyond that. But as devotees, even in a difficult situation, you could be having a frightful dream, right? A nightmare while you're sleeping. First thing, if your conditioning is improving and you see yourself making progress in devotional life, your first thing is you're thinking about Lord Narasimha, or you're thinking about Krishna. You're saying, Krishna, please relieve me from this situation, right? Even in your sleep. That's the kind of thing that remembrance is so important. And even to have that remembrance, you first have to be on the devotional path. And to be on the devotional path, you need to be grateful that, we all need to be grateful about where we are, regardless how long the journey is, but we're on the path. That's number one. Number two is by doing that, we're able to remember Krishna. And that in itself is taking us so farther along in terms of winning those day-to-day battles, the stressful situations we're talking about. And when that happens, then the scriptures come into play, the messages that we hear come into play, because now we're consciously thinking, oh my gosh, am I doing the right thing? Because when we're stressed out, like I said, our sense of judgment is completely impaired, right? We tend to do the wrong things out of conditioning. And yes, it's not like Krishna is standing there with the stick and saying, you did the wrong thing. I'm not going to talk to you for the next 10 days. Our spouse may do that. Your friend may do that. Your child may do that. But Krishna will never do that. Krishna is merciful. He's there to help us. He's going to, we just need to let him know, Krishna, I'm in your hands. I'm going through this difficult situation. Please help me. And everything from there, the situation changes. Your stress levels go down. And when your stress levels go down, you're able to think clearly, and you start to see Krishna's hand in how he's helping you. He doesn't have to be physically present, but you can see the effects of Krishna's reciprocation, right? So that's what will happen over a period of time. It's not going to happen right away, obviously. It's a journey, and we need to continue to inculcate that habit of remembering Krishna. And that remembrance comes through gratitude and practice. And as we keep doing that, then all of these messages will start coming together. The things that we heard, a few days back, or something we read today, or something that we had during an experience that we had during an association with a devotee. These things will start coming out. And we tend to focus on the negative side of things. That's the other part of it. We need to, consciously focus, even in all our interactions, whether it's with the Bhagavatam, or even in this lecture, for instance, in the mornings that we listen to, we hear. And some of us cannot make it due to, work schedules and things like that, but catch up. Set aside some time and come back and listen to it at a later point in time. So technology is providing us that asynchronicity that allows us to, decouple. But at the same time, by associating with these valuable tools that are being given to us, we can focus on the positive aspects. I'm saying, when any of these interactions that we have with the devotees, or the messages we're receiving, or the various situations, we tend to focus on the negative. Focus on the positive side. What are we getting from there? The good things that we're getting. How is it bringing us closer to Krishna? So as long as we're doing these kinds of things, the mindset slowly starts to change. And like I said, Prabhupada's whole thing was about consciousness, changing your consciousness. Then the consciousness will direct us towards Krishna almost naturally and take us in that direction. We may not have that purity to completely, relish, or to be able to exercise that level of thinking. But in little bit, baby steps, as my Guru Maharaj would say, baby steps. If you're moving the right direction, that's progress. I don't know. I give you a long answer, Prabhu, but I hope that helps from a practical perspective.
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you so much. One big thing, and then also be truthful to the Lord at least.
Very much. He's not judgmental, Prabhu. I used to even tell my mother. My mother would say, why is Krishna doing this? We're doing this and that, but why am I being punished? I would tell her, Mother, it's not, don't think that Krishna is punishing. Krishna never punishes. Krishna is always there to help us. So it's our mindset. We need to change that mindset. It's obviously things that we've done wrong in the past that are, now fructifying, and we're seeing the karmic reactions of that. But even that, Krishna is there to help us and diminish some of that effect. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. That was a very good question. Anyone else? Anything else? Four minutes over. So, Lingaraj Prabhu, I'll leave it up to you.
And Prabhu, thank you so much.
Thank you. Hare Krishna. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and wishing you a Krishna conscious week ahead.